Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a really crucial chapter of Indian history and colonial encounters, the Anglo Mysore Wars. These were a series of pivotal conflicts back in the late 18th century. Our mission today, well, it's to unlock the secrets of how this powerful Indian kingdom, Mysore, pushed the mighty British East India Company right to its limits, and what that tells us about power and resistance in that whole era.
That's exactly it. These weren't just, separate battles here and there. It was really an epic struggle, a fight for control, for sovereignty, and influence across southern India. We saw intense military conflict, really complex diplomacy, and just fierce indigenous resistance. We've sifted through quite a bit of historical analysis, pulling out the key insights for you to give a really comprehensive view of these wars.
Right, and what you'll discover, I think, is how the Kingdom of Mysore, under these incredible rulers, Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, posed a truly significant challenge. A challenge to the British East India Company that profoundly impacted the future, really, of the entire Indian subcontinent. So where should we start this journey? Let's kick off with the rise of Mysore itself. It emerges as this significant power in South India, and remarkably, it kept its independence going way back since the Vijayanagar Empire days. What made Mysore stand out? What made it so formidable back then?
Well, Mysore's rise is completely tied to Hyder Ali. He became the de facto ruler in 1761. Now, at that point, Mysore was facing serious threats, territorially speaking. You had the Marathas, this powerful confederacy in the west, and the Nizam of Hyderabad, ruler of a big Deccan state. But Hyder Ali, he was a genuine military innovator. By 1758, he'd already kicked the Marathas out of Bangalore, and then you have the Marathas losing badly at the Battle of Panipat in 1761. That defeat actually let Hyder consolidate his power even more. His real genius, perhaps, was adopting European military tech ahead of the curve. In 1755, with French expert help, mind you, he set up a modern arsenal down in Dindigul, and he reorganized his army completely. European lines, quick cavalry, really effective artillery, superior firearms, the works.
Wow, so he was really challenging that British assumption of, technological superiority right from the start.
Absolutely. And by 1761, he'd also overthrown the previous power broker, Nonjaraj, extended control over these rebellious local chiefs, the Polygars, and conquered significant territories: Bidnur, Sindh, Sera, Kanara, and crucially, Malabar.
Okay, so this rapid expansion, the military modernization, it naturally put him on a collision course with the British. What were the specific flashpoints then that ignited that first Anglo-Mysore War? And how did his control over the Malabar spice trade routes play into it? That must have been a direct threat.
Definitely a threat. The First Anglo-Mysore War, running 1767 to 69, had a few key routes. The British East India Company, they were actively looking for overland connections between Madras and Bengal. They had their eyes on the northern Sirkars, these coastal territories, formerly French, then granted to Clive by the Mughal Emperor in 65. The Nizam of Hyderabad, who had strong French links, initially said no to Clive, but eventually he was persuaded into an alliance with the British, along with the Marathas, specifically against Hyder Ali.
Right, but the war itself, the actual fighting, it was anything but predictable, wasn't it? You see these incredibly fast shifts in loyalty, like the Marathas attack Mysore in 67, Hyder pays them off, makes peace quick. Then the Nizam, who's supposed to be with the British, just switches sides and joins Hyder. How common was that kind of flip-flopping? It sounds chaotic.
It was remarkably common, actually. It just shows you the political landscape back then. Alliances were totally fluid, very pragmatic. Self-interest usually won out over long-term loyalty. So the British had to retreat. Then they basically threatened Hyderabad to force the Nizam back into line with a new treaty in 1768. In that treaty, the Nizam promised the British the Diwani rights of Mysore, basically, the right to collect taxes there if Hyder Ali was kicked out. But even with that, an English force sent to capture Mysore got soundly beaten by Hyder, and then he almost captured Madras itself.
Almost took Madras. Incredible.
Yeah. So this leads directly to the Treaty of Madras in April 1769. And its outcomes were pretty significant. Both sides agreed to return the territories they'd captured. The district of Arcot went to the Nawab of Arcot. And crucially, there's this mutual promise of support against any foreign invasion.
Ah, the mutual support clause. Sounds important.
It was meant to be. But, what's really insightful here is that this key clause, well, it almost immediately became its weak point. It's Achilles' heel, really.
And that fragility became clear super quickly, didn't it?
Yeah.
Just a year later, 1770, the Marathas are back, attacking Mysore again. And Hyder Ali, he's forced to make peace by paying tribute. where were the British?
Exactly. Complete absence of British support, despite the treaty terms.
So it really makes you think, doesn't it, how fast those alliances could shift and how much a promise actually meant in that era of, well, intense power struggles.
Yeah.
A lesson in geopolitics. Okay, so the British flat out failed to honor their side of the Treaty of Madras when the Marathas attacked Hyder in 71. That breach alone feels like a major trigger for round two.
Precisely. A huge trigger. But beyond that broken promise, there were other things fueling the Second Anglo-Mysore War. You had growing hostilities between the English and the French, partly because of the American War of Independence happening overseas, 1775 to 83. That conflict spilled into India. Then the British captured Mahe. Now, Mahe was a French settlement, yes, but it was within Hyder's territory and absolutely vital for Mysore's military supplies.
Ah, so a direct provocation, cutting off his supply.
A direct provocation, exactly. So seeing these threats piling up, Hyder Ali brilliantly put together this grand alliance. Him, the Nizam, and the Marathas, all against the British in 1779. He was trying to corner them.
So with this new alliance backing him, the war kicks off when the British march through Hyder's land without asking to capture Guntur. And Hyder hits back hard, right? Defeats Colonel Bailey, captures Arcot in 1780. Sounds like he had the British on the back foot initially.
He certainly did. But then Warren Hastings, the governor-general, pulled off a really clever diplomatic move. He essentially broke up that confederacy, made separate peace with the Nizam, came to understandings with key Maratha leaders Bonsla and Scindia, and just like that, Hyder Ali was isolated again. Then Sir Arakut managed to defeat Hyder at Porto Novo in 1781. A significant setback.
But then comes this absolutely pivotal moment, the kind that changes everything. Hyder Ali dies in December 1782. They kept it secret for a bit, apparently, to keep morale up. But his son, Tipu Sultan, steps right in and continues the fight with, well, the same fire. How did Tipu's leadership change things?
Tipu taking over immediately and just carrying on the fight. It was a huge statement. It showed Mysore's resilience. It signaled this wasn't just Hyder Ali's war, the resistance would continue. The Second Anglo-Mysore War eventually ended with the Treaty of Mangalore in 1784. Under its terms, basically, everything went back to how it was before the war. Conquests returned, prisoners freed. But what's really fascinating and quite significant is that this was the last time an Indian power actually dictated terms to the company.
The last time?
The last time. Tipu Sultan personally drove those negotiations. It was a brief but notable moment where an Indian ruler held the upper hand diplomatically before, the British really cemented their dominance later on.
That Treaty of Mangalore, okay, a win for Mysore in a way, dictating terms. But it also showed English weaknesses, didn't it? And that must have emboldened Tipu. Like his father, he seemed absolutely set on getting the English out of India.
He absolutely was. And he started taking concrete steps. He pushed through various internal reforms to strengthen Mysore, which naturally worried the British and their allies. He actively sought help from France, sending envoys out, trying to build international support. He even started a Jacobean club in his capital, Seringapatam, flew the French Republican flag, planted a Tree of Liberty.
Wow, Jacobean Club, Tree of Liberty, those are direct symbols from the French Revolution. That's quite a statement against the British monarchy.
Exactly. It signaled his alignment, his ideological stance. He also expanded his territory, pushing into Travancore, which happened to be a British ally. Now, the immediate trigger for the Third War, it was kind of complex. The Raja of Travancore started building forts inland. Tipu claimed and bought forts from the Dutch in Cochin's state, a state that paid tribute to Tipu. So when Tipu attacked Travancore over this, the British saw it as an attack on their ally and jumped in. By 1790, they'd reformed that tripartite alliance. British, Nizam, Marathas, all against Tipu. He was surrounded.
So the Third War begins. 3 phases, apparently. And initially, Tipu does really well, right? Inflicts heavy losses on the English, showing his strategic skill. It got serious enough that Lord Cornwallis himself had to take command in late 1790. He captured Bangalore in 91. But Tipu's strategies, described as brilliant, dragged the war out. Cornwallis even had to retreat at one point. Lack of supplies.
That's right. Tipu really made them work for it. The turning point, though, was timely help from the Marathas. They provided crucial provisions. That allowed Cornwallis to restart his campaign, pushing towards Seringapatam, Tipu's capital. That put Tipu at a major disadvantage. From there, the English forces moved pretty quickly, occupying nearby hill forts and finally seizing Seringapatam itself in February 1792.
And the results of that defeat were just brutal for Tipu. Spelled out in the Treaty of Seringapatam, 1792, he had to give up half his kingdom, Malabar Coast, Baramahal, Dindigul to the British, Tungapadra region to the Marathas, Krishna to Pennar to the Nizam.
A massive loss of territory, plus a huge war payment, 3 crore rupees.
And the most symbolic part, maybe the most humiliating, surrendering 2 of his own sons as hostages to the English.
A truly crushing defeat. But despite how crippling those terms were, Mysore's strength was definitely reduced, but crucially, it wasn't completely extinguished. So this outcome, harsh as it was, really just set the stage for one final, inevitable showdown. The British had wounded the tiger, but hadn't killed it yet.
Right. That humiliating defeat, those terms. Tipu Sultan, now known everywhere as the Tiger of Mysore, must have been consumed by wanting revenge. His goal now, rebuild Mysore, make it strong again, regain that lost glory.
Absolutely. And his immediate focus was finding allies, anyone who would help him push back against the British. He wrote to the revolutionary government in France. His activities, like that Jacobean club we mentioned, deeply worried the British. Then Napoleon lands in Egypt in 1798, and part of his grand plan was explicitly aimed at capturing British possessions in India. Mysore was seen as a key stepping stone for that. Napoleon even sent a personal letter of assurance to Tipu.
A direct letter from Napoleon. That must have set off alarm bells like crazy in Calcutta.
Oh, absolutely. This direct link to revolutionary expansionist France. It was a major strategic threat.
And this brings a new governor-general onto the scene, Richard Wellesley, Lord Mornington. He arrives, apparently already terrified of Napoleon, and basically prepares for war straight away. He tried diplomacy first, though. Asked Tipu to ditch the French, accept a subsidiary alliance, but Tipu just ignored the letters. Why? Was he that confident in French help?
It seems likely he saw Wellesley's diplomacy as just a demand for surrender, wrapped in polite language. He was probably gambling, banking on that French assistance, materializing, and on his own rebuilt strength. So the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War became unavoidable. Wellesley quickly revived the Triple Alliance. He got the Marathas to stay neutral and, crucially, signed a subsidiary alliance with the Nizam.
Ah, the subsidiary alliance. That's where the Nizam accepts British protection, but basically gives up foreign policy control and pays for British troops stationed there.
Exactly. And very conveniently for the British, this led to the French force at Hyderabad being disbanded. A key French foothold removed. Then the invasion began. British army from Bombay in the west, Madras army from the east, forcing Tipu back to Seringapatam. The war itself was very short, very decisive. Tipu fought bravely right to the end, dying in May 1799 while defending the city walls as his capital fell.
Such a dramatic end, and the outcomes of this Fourth War were just final. Reshaped the whole map of South India. The old Woodiyar dynasty was put back on the throne of Mysore, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't independent anymore.
Not at all. Mysore became a princely state, firmly under the thumb, the suzerainty of the East India Company, and large chunks of what remained of Mysore's territory were carved up between the British, the Nizam, and the Marathas. Tipu Sultan's death really marks the end of an era, the end of strong, independent resistance against British expansion in the South. Okay, so let's maybe step back a bit now, connect this to the bigger picture, and look at some fascinating details that go beyond just the battles. One thing that's truly remarkable is Mysore's military technology, especially those iron-cased rockets they used in the Third and Fourth Wars.
Ah, yes, the rockets. I've heard about those.
They were apparently far more advanced than anything the British had encountered before.
Yeah.
Much higher thrust, longer range, up to 2 kilometers, which was incredible for the time.
2 kilometers. So what impact did that have? Did it actually, change battles?
It certainly seems to have had an impact, causing confusion and casualties. But perhaps the bigger impact was long-term. The British captured and studied these rockets very carefully, and this directly influenced their own rocket development back in Britain. It inspired the Congreve rocket, which people might know from the Napoleonic Wars, like in the lyrics of the U.S. national anthem, "The rocket's red glare."
Wow. So that's a direct link, and it really shows something profound, doesn't it? That indigenous resistance wasn't just sitting back, it was adaptive, innovative. It completely challenges that old idea that advanced military tech was purely a European thing. Innovation was happening everywhere.
Absolutely right. And another key insight is just how complex those alliances were among the Indian powers, the Marathas, the Nizam, constantly shifting, often driven purely by short-term self-interest. And the British became absolute masters at manipulating these relationships, using treaties, subsidies, promises, anything to isolate Mysore and achieve dominance. That subsidiary alliance system was a key tool in that strategy.
Right, bringing states under control without always needing direct conquest. Very shrewd.
Very. And we should also touch on the socioeconomic side. These wars obviously caused huge disruption, agriculture, trade, yet Tipu's administration is often noted for being quite able. He tried to reform land revenue, actively promoted trade things like sericulture for silk, spices, textiles, trying to keep the economy resilient even under all that pressure.
And what about his cultural or ideological stance? You mentioned the French connection, but how did he position himself more broadly?
That's a really interesting aspect. He seemed to fuse Islamic traditions with local South Indian customs. There's evidence of religious tolerance in his governance, despite sometimes being portrayed otherwise. He certainly viewed his struggle partly as a jihad, a righteous struggle against foreign Christian colonial powers. But that was often nuanced by pragmatic governance. He needed to unify diverse communities, Hindus, Muslims, different castes, against that common foreign enemy.
Okay, so after diving this deep into 4 major wars, the tech, the diplomacy, the personalities, what does it all really mean? What's the takeaway for the broader history of India and maybe for us looking back now?
Well, these Anglo Mysore wars undeniably represent a massive turning point. Their conclusion meant the British East India Company had effectively consolidated its power over South India, and it really paved the way for the wider use of that subsidiary alliance system, which became a cornerstone of ensuring ultimately complete British dominance across much of the subcontinent.
But as this deep dive shows, even though Tipu Sultan was ultimately defeated, he remains this powerful symbol, doesn't he? A symbol of resistance, of maybe visionary leadership in Indian historical memory. It really highlights the fierce struggle and the resilience of Indian rulers facing that relentless expansion of the British colonial empire.
Exactly. The wars really underscore that intricate dance between military strategy, clever diplomacy, and even cultural identity in the fight against colonialism. They offer really valuable insights, I think, into early modern Indian history and precisely how British imperial rule took shape on the ground.
So for you, the listener, this story, it's definitely not just some dry historical footnote. It's a really powerful reminder that history is rarely black and white. Even in defeat, there can be these enduring legacies of innovation like the rockets and sheer defiance against overwhelming odds. What really stands out to you from this deep dive into the Anglo-Mysore Wars? Maybe consider how these conflicts shape not just the political map of India, but also the very idea, the very nature of resistance against immense power, something to think about.